Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Norm.
I'm Adam.
I'm Mark.
Mark Dubeau, welcome.
We have a special guest this
Hello,
week.
guys.
Art director, part of Phil Tippett's crew at various times, and also helped Norm build his Tomenasuke blaster last year.
Longtime friend.
That's true.
Of the site. I think we first met like the very first time I went to, maybe not, one of the first times I visited Tippett, because you did a lot with the Kane maquette project.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, for Chronicle Collectibles.
That's right, which is like the toy, the stop motion puppet that was impossible to turn into a toy. Well, they did it.
Somehow they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. There was like 274 molds. It was ridiculous. There was a lot,
The picture you sent me of all the parts just laid out, just that picture is exhausting in and of itself.
Yeah, and your eyes crossed. And even though everything was kind of like laid out on the table, you were still, flummoxed by just how many parts there were.
And being flummoxed by how many parts there were is part of the design purpose of Kane, right?
Yeah. Not to go into too much detail, but it was kind of like a bit of a Russian nesting doll. It was just, and everything kind of worked. Pieces were like overlaid. You would open it up, and where you'd imagine you'd just find like a block of like aluminum, there was actually like like a little piston that was crossing and all these little it was incredible. I think
because it's also a stop motion animatable puppet, so every joint is adjustable in terms of its tension and its strength, and it's holding up a lot. The puppet itself weighs 6 or 7 pounds or something like that.
They're pretty heavy. They may actually even be heavier than that.
Wow. That's heavy too.
I don't think I've ever held the original.
Well, we still have them at the studio. You can come
there were a few of them, right?
Oh, no, I have. In Peter Jackson's collection, he has a complete shooting model, and I have held that one.
Yeah, there. I think like fully articulated ones they're essentially 1/6 scale. There was anywhere from like 7 to 11 of them, or something like that.
Good
but in different various stages of decay and whatnot.
Right.
So
for different shots and scenes.
Yeah.
And taking that apart, having an intimate relationship with that piece of movie history, something you enjoyed because we're all cut from the same cloth. You, a huge fan of not just RoboCop.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of taking it apart and enjoying a little piece of movie history,
yes.
Let's talk about something that happened to me recently.
Okay.
Do tell.
I was lucky enough to be among the early people to see a screening of Denis Villeneuve's new sequel to Blade Runner 2049.
Oh my goodness.
Should I cover my ears? cover my heart.
No, I am actually under a specific embargo, and I will discuss nothing about characters, nothing about plot, nothing about really nothing about the substance of the film in this podcast. To talk about, there's not even going to be remote spoilers.
Yes,
So
this is a spoiler.
I'm not even going to tell you that whether there are reveals here or there or whatever. It's literally, we're not discussing the plot at all.
Okay, so it's going to be a half an hour of us staring uncomfortably at each other.
And envious at you. And one of the reasons we asked you, Mark, to join, because you, like Adam and like some of the friends we have in the prop making community and the special effects community, Blade Runner is incredibly influential to you. You're up there as one of the biggest Blade Runner fans we know.
I guess almost to dork status. I mean, I wouldn't have taken the career path I did if I didn't watch Blade Runner when I was like, I think for me it came out when I was like 7 years old, and I saw it when I was 8. And it came on TV.
Wow.
And my mom at 8. And my mom my mom let me stay up late to watch it because it was a Harrison Ford movie and Star Wars and whatnot. So she thought, it's a good old-fashioned science fiction film. And then the moment the thumbs went in the eyes, she was like, "Oh God, what have I done?"
At that point, you're pretty late.
Yeah.
You've already seen the love scene. Shit's gotten weird.
At that point, it's like too late. He's twisted for life, but in all the right ways.
But like your mom's French, right?
No,
French
actually,
Canadian.
No, my dad is French Canadian. My mom is Irish Scottish Canadian. Oh, and so
I was gonna say if she was French, she'd be like, who cares?
That's just it. She's just sitting in the corner with the Gauloise. Whatever. He'll get over it.
It is the pain of life. Better to happen now than later.
But coincidentally, I'm from the same town that Denis Villeneuve is from.
And obviously, you and I both being Blade Runner geeks, we've been being asked for the last couple of years that this film has been in production, if we're excited. And the answer is we've been provisionally excited, but we've been disappointed so many times by big reboots of franchises that meant a lot to us.
Reboots or sequels or forced sequels. I mean, the fact that...
Or prequels.
Or prequels, absolutely. Some context, when this was announced, Denis Villeneuve did not have the standing as a director, at least in the public eye, that he does today.
Yeah, he'd done several smaller films like Prisoners, and then Sicario.
Sicario was the one.
He did like a Canadian. He's Canadian, right? So he did a Canadian film. Incendiary. Oh my God,
which is fantastic. But I mean, after I saw Sicario, I knew it was going to be in good hands because he could go to some very, very dark places, and that's what this film needed.
And this is what excited me, because when I looked at some of those beautiful overhead shots of Juarez in Sicario, knowing that he was in pre-production on Blade Runner 2049, I was like, this is the kind of approach to a city and to making cityscape shots being part of the process. And one of the problems I had with so a lot of films have had Blade Runner baked into their DNA, from the completely comically terrible, like the reboot of Total Recall.
I knew you were going to say Total Recall.
Well,
yes.
To be honest, the art direction of the cities in Total Recall is magnificent.
Yeah.
It's just in the
perfect
service
example
of a terrible plot and
Yeah.
unwatchable movie. Ghost in the Shell, a better movie, still super flawed, but again, my problem with that was like all the cityscapes clearly inspired and influenced by Blade Runner, and yet to no end. Like there was no way that the cityscape shots really pushed the plot forward.
Yeah.
Whereas when Denis Villeneuve was shooting Juarez, that plot is moving forward. I'm learning things about this culture in that cityscape shot.
It's a character.
And that got me excited about this movie.
And working with the same director of photography, Roger Deakins, who we all, legendary director of photography, cinematographer, but recently with movies like Skyfall and Sicario and the things we've seen in the trailers, at least over on this side of the table.
A legendarily hands-on director of photography famously does not do any second unit shooting on his films. He is always the one operating. I mean, I don't know if he's always operating, but he is always the one with the camera when it's filming.
Designing.
And he does have the chops to follow up after Jordan Cronenweth, who's just a genius in everything that he did. One of the reasons, actually, is a very, very small reason, but one of the reasons why I was excited when I heard that Denis Villeneuve was going to do it is because in the original film, they did the city speak thing where people would kind of oscillate between different languages and whatnot. And coming from Montreal, famously, people there speak in that manner because they go from English to French. And very often there's a lot of Italian, there's a lot of Greek, a lot of Vietnamese. They'll actually like bop around with like 3-4 different languages in some areas. And I was like, he may actually have the ear for something like that. You know,
it's funny because when I was first becoming obsessed with Blade Runner in the mid 80s, I was dating a Russian girl who was had literally escaped from Russia with her mom when she was like 6 years old, and she and her mom spoke this kind of hilariously bastard Americanized Russian, where it was like the bank account, just word salad, some linguistic salad, and so it made me feel very much like I'm dating someone who lives in the Blade Runner universe.
It's kind of like that. I remember growing up, and when you're a kid, you speak the language of the area that you grow up, and then you go to like another place, you come to the U.S. or whatnot, and you just kind of spew out what you normally say, and you're looking for a convenience store, and you have a little bit of an accent because you come from Canada, and then you say, hey, can you tell me where the dépanneur is? And they're like, what are you talking about? A dépanneur? And that's like a convenience store in Quebec, so... I don't know. I kind of got excited about that. I thought but also coming from Montreal, it was like, hey, homeboy.
Also, the rights for Blade Runner have been tied up in a legal morass for decades.
Yeah.
It has been a very thorny, complicated thing. It's one of the reasons there was never licensed products out of Blade Runner. I mean, me and my fellow Blade Runner blaster collecting fanatics, no one's ever been able to get a license. And a few years ago, Alcon Entertainment somehow navigated through whatever that thicket of legal difficulties were to obtain the rights and reboot this.
Yeah.
And the fear with a sequel, reboot, prequel, some type of follow-up for something that's so treasured does it feel like it's a money grab? How involved or were the original creative force behind the original film? What is this film a logical continuation? Is it it's been many years, so so many questions.
And we've been privy to so many different categories of reboots. The Total Recall reboot is a lower budget, adjusted dollars version of its original, with clearly the hope that the love of this franchise will get us to make our money back. We don't have to worry too much about plot or character or script. And so we've seen so many of those.
And on the flip side, very successes as well. Star Trek, we always talk about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where yes, a reboot, but built into the continuity, so the fans feel like there is a direct story thread tying to the original, even an actor.
And Star Wars, I feel like when Abrams did Force Awakens, he's very specifically talking to that level of disappointment, and he's like, I'm going to take you back to the Star Wars that you loved. I think it's one of the reasons that George didn't like it, because he was like, I did that. And it's true. He is literally he's mining that same place for to take you back to it. And it was exactly right, I thought.
As a seed to push it forward.
Yeah.
And so...
well, I was going to say, you always obviously would fall into, especially with Blade Runner, you fall into that been there, done that kind of thing. But I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a provision in the contract that they could not reboot it, and they could not remake the original one. They had that was an untouchable tenet. And they could do a series, they could do a sequel, they could do anything but go back and try to redo the first film.
Well, that's brilliant, because the first film is on so many people's top 10 lists, on most people's top 5 lists. It's in my top 3. And there's only 9 or 10 films in my top 3.
I may have 2 films in my top 3.
This movie, I've seen the original Blade Runner probably 75 times. I've seen it in theaters at least a dozen times, starting at the Thalia and the Waverly Place Theater, and even at midnight shows at the 8th Street Playhouse, where I was a projectionist. Somewhere in here, I have a single frame of Blade Runner that was cut out of one of the release prints for me by my friend back in 1985.
I may have seen... I think I've seen it about 130 times. But I will count the fact that, as an artist, sometimes you'll put it on in the background, and then during the quiet periods, you kind of you play the imagery in your head, even though you just hear it. And then when the stuff comes up that you really, really want to look at, you just kind of turn to it. And so, and I know a lot of people have films like that, like Ghostbusters is one of those films people just put on in the background.
Back to the Future or something.
Definitely.
And I realize I tell a lie. I don't think I've seen it a dozen times in the theaters. I think it's maybe even twice as much as that, because I've seen most of the interim new versions as they've come out, starting in 1992 with that first weird release, compromise cut that was not Ridley Scott's director's cut, but it was advertised as such, and then Ridley Scott launched his director's cut, but then that was 1997, and then 10 years later came back to do the definitive director's cut. I mean, there's at least 5 theatrical versions that are in the super DVD set, and I think I saw 4 of them in the theater.
Oh my god.
Well, you're lucky. You actually saw the Blade Runner equivalent of seeing the Beatles on a Ed Sullivan show by seeing that original work print, because I heard that after that came out, it essentially got almost confiscated by the studio and has not been released.
I thought it was part of the master DVD set. I did
until then.
Until then. No,
so.
It was fascinating, because I knew the film, even in 1992, I knew the film so intimately. The title sequence is different. The music is all scratch music. Vangelis' music hadn't been written yet, most of it. Radical scenes that aren't in this final, in what we've seen, different versions of scenes.
And a lot of that actually made it into the European cut. There's one shot that I know that I'm watching the European cut is when they're in the noodle shop and you see the plate of food hit the table.
Oh yeah, right.
And then okay, this one is taken from the European print.
It's like being in different dimensions, with multiverses. Now I know which dimension I'm in, because the plate landed on the table.
My top stopped spinning.
What, monologue? Oh, I'm in the monologue dimension.
Yeah, seriously. Seriously.
So
Yeah. So how
I-
can we ask you or have you talk about this film without giving away the content?
I'm gonna try. I've done some work with Alcon over the past year.
Yeah, we have to be upfront about that.
We did this. So Alcon graciously sent me and Joey as representatives of Tested.com to the set in Budapest last fall. We spent about a week on the set, and they rolled out the red carpet for us. And this stuff we shot, I think
Next week, we're hoping to release some of the stuff.
and some of it will be released next week, some of it post-release. Behind-the-scenes shots, talking to the craftspeople that put this together, from prop master Doug Harlocker and his incredible team that made the new blasters, and lots of the sets and some of the big special effects. Again, I'm not going to give spoilers to our content or to the film, but it was really heady to be on site for the film. And I did get to see, on one of the days, I got to see them filming some of the shots that are actually in the trailer and in the final film. And just being there on set and watching Denis and Deakins talk, watching them. I mean, I'm way far away. So when you visit a big budget movie set like this, you don't ever get near the movie stars or the huge key players, right? They have a movie to make, and you don't get in their way. But I'm sitting there in the corner of this room and watching Denis and Deakins with this ludicrously complex set work on this lighting of surpassing intricacy. And Ryan Gosling shows up and does his bit in the scene. It was absolutely thrilling. But just from watching how they shot that scene, and I'm really working too hard in my head to make sure I'm not giving any spoilers. I'm running like two sub-programs at once here.
If I had hair, it would be standing on end.
Just watching how they shot that scene, I thought, oh, this film is in good hands. I could see, just in the lighting of that scene, I could see at least two different bits from the original that they were calling back to with the lighting and how the lighting moved. And that was me on set one day. Like watching them filming the key movie in just a few hours. And everything I've seen since then has continued to convince me that this film is in the right hands. The trailers, I didn't watch the second trailer until after I'd seen the film. I've been really good about trailers for movies I'm eagerly anticipating. I'll watch the very first teaser, and then I won't watch anything else.
And the short films.
And the short films, right. And the third short film just got released today, and I have not yet watched it. I have been so full on today. I left Los Angeles at 5 a.m. I've had like 3 or 4 hours of phone calls and interviews, and we've done some stuff for Tested Premium. There's a lot to go over.
Yeah. And you show up. This isn't a spoiler, but you show up in the second.
I show up in the second film, which is with Dave Bautista, and it's set in 2048. He plays a character named Sapper, and he is selling some nematode worms to a guy named the Sultan, and I am one of the background players.
Yes.
It was directed by Luke Scott, Ridley Scott's son, a filmmaker in his own right. And Luke Scott is famous to me because...
Yes.
In the scene in Alien, when the astronauts enter the chamber with the space jockey and they look like they're dwarfed by it, it's because they are. It's because the astronauts are 3/4 sized. They are Luke Scott, Charlie Borman, and I can't remember who the third one is, all at the age of 12 and 13 years old, putting on 3/4 size alien spacesuits to make the space jockey look extra big. So Luke Scott is pretty much exactly my age. And I said, do I have a picture of you in my computer in an alien spacesuit? And he's like, yes, you do. I still own that suit.
That's amazing.
Oh, really? He
Yeah.
still owns the suit. Can I ask a question? How present was Ridley on the set? Like, did you feel his presence, or was he there in spirit? Or?
He was there in spirit. He executive produced this film, but he was not on set in Budapest when I was there at all. The second film, I can talk about this because it's actually happened, was an incredible set built, I'm not kidding, in a matter of 2 days flat.
Wow.
In the granite caverns in which they shot the troll market from Hellboy.
You must have been in heaven.
I was in heaven, and many of the seasoned film crew there in Budapest worked on Guillermo's films, and so we had lots to talk about. But they took all of these set elements that they'd been using in other sets for Blade Runner to build this completely new city set, which is the where that Sapper film is takes place. And just walking through it was thrilling. I mean, they have smoke everywhere. They have water dripping and rain and the wet granite, and it smells funky, and everyone's dressed in the rainy clothes. It was fantasy camp day. There's a picture of me standing on the set in my costume, and like you could just see the joy on my face.
Did they let you keep any of it?
No.
Oh.
No.
So, the film they have to make, 2049, has to appease you guys, the hardcore fan, the hardest of the hardcore, the film, and which the original film means so many different things to the people who've seen it to varying different degrees, but also has to be a satisfactory film on its own. So, what can you say about how the film
about Blade Runner
satisfies?
2049?
Yes.
Oh, I'm still not ready to go there yet.
Okay.
We're going to
All
still
right.
talk about the Sapper film just for another minute or two. One thing I wanted to say is I'm back there behind the man mountain known as Dave Bautista, and I'm doing my thing, and what they told me to do is hold out these things and go Sultan, 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 and just be annoying. And the background players are all excellent. Like, everyone was really invested and really good. And Bautista is there doing his scene. And after about 30 minutes, he turns to me, and he recognizes me from something, but he can't quite tell because I don't have my glasses on because there's no eyeglasses in the future. And he goes, "Are you a writer or something? Have we met?" And I said, I hosted Mythbusters. And he did this very sort of sweet, humble smile, and then stuck out this bunch of bananas he calls a hand, and shook my hand and said, "I am a huge fan. My wife is a big geek, and we love your show." And a nicer human being than Dave Bautista I have rarely met. He was incredibly gracious and also a super wonderful actor to watch work. In that sequence in the film, he kicks the shit out of 5 guys. I believe those are key members of his stunt team. And I got to watch them film that fight from about as far away as the camera is. They actually made me a background player, just like stuck in the corner. And I mean, if I remember correctly, I think it was Luke Scott that was like, "You just watch this, stand right here, and you won't be in the frame, but you get to see it." And watching Bautista, who is he comes from pro wrestling. He's a terrific actor and a physical performer and a genuine stunt person. He's working with a great stunt crew. Watching him do that fight sequence right in front of me was astounding. A level of physical prowess I have not been privy to on a movie set. I haven't seen fight scenes right in front of me on a movie set, and I felt like I was looking at the gold standard.
Was it feeling like moving at high speed or slow motion?
No, high speed and scary and neck snapping and chains. But I mean, it is a dance, right? It is this dance with 100 moves in less than 20 seconds. And all of them have their parts to play. And he's he's a giant.
Yeah, he looks like a bear.
He is, but he's incredibly facile with his. Yeah, it was really a genuine treat.
And good things have been said about his. I've heard things in advance, but you can actually see it in this trailer. He does come across as he has a very nuanced, delicate performance, and everybody's used to him as Drax, right? Who's kind of like, my turds are famously huge, but in this one, it's he comes, you're watching it, and it's it's a different person. You recognize his giant frame, but at the same time, it's wow, he comes across as being very, just very reserved and quiet. And
if I was a working film director today, I would be looking for a weird, non-standard role for Bautista to play in a romantic comedy. I mean, because I think he's a really fine actor, and I think that as he goes, we'll get to see more and more of the breadth of what he can do because it's real. It's real. He's a genuine performer.
Right. In Spectre, he had the menacing presence, but maybe not the depth they need for that role.
Right. Right. I mean, so people keep casting him as the big heavy.
Yeah.
And the fact is, I think he can do a lot more. And it was lovely to meet him and talk to him. And, he's very familiar with San Francisco. We had lots to talk about.
Oh, awesome.
Lovely.
That's
great. So, Blade Runner 2049.
All right.
Okay.
I'll
brace myself.
It's great. No, I'm here to say it's. I don't want to oversell it. I'm nervous about overselling it, but as after I wipe the tears from my eyes at the end, I am sufficiently blown away that I cannot wait to see it again. It has all the sensitivity and poetic metaphorical depth that the original does, if not more. I mean, there are times in which the imagery and the execution of the narrative is so metaphorical. It feels like I'm watching the film equivalent of a novel, of a real piece of literature, not just something for my visual entertainment. There are aspects of it that I'm still unpacking in my head in terms of what they mean and how they fit together. The performances are phenomenal. It is like, I mean, I was saying to people, I'm provisionally excited because it's the best director I could imagine, the best DP I could imagine, and Harrison Ford's in it, and Ryan Gosling is the best guy I could imagine playing another Blade Runner.
Yeah.
The fact is that everybody else is also that great. Even the small players are deeply, deeply in this world. You start watching this movie and you are in that world. And it is a great world, and it might be one of my favorite reboots I have ever seen. I'm getting a little choked up here because it's like I haven't. This is the first moment at which I've been able and allowed by the embargo to publicly talk about my feelings about this film. My recommendation to go see it is to not let anyone give you any spoilers or anything. Just don't know anything. You don't even need to see Blade Runner to see this movie. Just go in cold, because it is a magnificent journey that Villeneuve and Deakins and Harrison Ford and Gosling have built. And like, my hat is off to Alcon for... I'm not going to say they stayed out of Villeneuve's way, because I don't know how they work together, but Villeneuve says, this is my director's cut. Yeah. I got to spend some time with him after the screening, and he said, you know, in contrast to his other films where he really books them out himself, he spent weeks in a room with Deakins in Montreal working out the entire layout of this film visually. And he's never brought a DP into that process so deeply before. And he says it's as much Deakins' film as it is his, and that collaboration was incredibly fruitful for them.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that's great to hear. I mean, like, everybody going into this, more so than a lot of other films, but like the term cautiously optimistic was bandied about a lot.
Yes,
because the players were all fine, but you know, like,
we have all been disappointed so many times.
That's just it. Like, on paper, everything to me, I was like, well, this all looks like, you know, like, it looks like they're paying respects to the things that they should be paying respects to. They were going, you know, trying to make things look the same, at the same time, like, forge ahead with like a newer vision of the future. Good actors, everybody, you know, seems like top notch, but at the same time, you're always kind of like, you know, you can put all the right ingredients together and still burn the cake.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally. And we've seen it. I mean, you know, our friend from Pixar, Angus MacLean, said to us, your movie wants to be bad. Your job it's trying its hardest to be bad. Your job as a director is to stop that from happening.
The two things you said that are going to stick with me going into it, because I don't want to hear any more. Is one, you don't want to oversell it, because the current expectation, you're afraid of hyping it too much.
I don't want to hype it too much. I just want people to have an honest experience
of
it.
That makes me excited. Because there are films that I feel like we can hype too much.
Look, and if you think you should be suspicious of my review because of how much I love Blade Runner, yeah, you should be. You totally should be. You should also go see this movie.
Another thing is that you said you don't need to see the original.
You really don't.
So
They've really crafted it so that you don't. But if you know the film, if you know the original well, and the better that you know the original, the more small tips of the hat there are. I'm not even going to say they're Easter eggs, because they're not nearly so obvious.
They're woven into the tapestry. It's like, let's say the original one was made out of gold thread, and this one's made out of like a totally different kind of thread, but there's gold thread all the way through it. The original DNA of Blade Runner is part of this film, and deeply. But again, as Villeneuve said to us, it's you'll recognize it's from the same world, but painted by a different painter. Oh, interesting.
The shots that you see, the visual majesty of the trailers is what you get in the film. Yeah. Like, it's not like you're looking at the best shots from the film, not by a long shot. Like I said, the cast is great. The standout performance for me is the actress that plays Love. She is you see her in the white coat with
Ryan Gosling?
Jared Leto.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sorry I'm blanking on her name right now. I'm an asshole for not having it at the top of my head, but her performance is magnificent, and she is really, really terrific.
Yeah.
But again, that's of a piece of an entire ensemble that is all just knocking it out of the park.
And she's very cloaked in mystery for a lot of us at this point, because we see her in the trailers, and there's in terms of like, she's very visually like, she really stands out. Even her weaponry that's been shown off at Comic-Con and whatnot has been very distinctive and whatnot. So a lot of people are wondering what is up with her,
So the other thing, and we were just watching Blade Runner for
Yes,
for an
totally
unauthorized commentary,
which is going to be on the site in a week or so.
But one of the things that I pointed out in the unauthorized commentary is that one of the reasons Blade Runner looks so good, even today, it looks as good as anything that's been made in the intervening 30 years, is because all the effect shots are done as what's called in camera. That means that the layers of the rain and the smoke and the spinners and the lights and the blinks and the everything was done by rewinding the film and rewinding the motion control camera and re-exposing on the same piece of film.
Optical printing.
Dozens of
Very
times.
different than optical compositing, which is the other style of special effects back then. And for this film, almost all of the sets were done as much of the sets as they could build. So the actor, Ryan Gosling, said that he often had to go to the sets a couple of hours before it was time for him to film on them, so he wouldn't be overwhelmed by the sets when he was filming on them.
Oh, wow.
And that really also is on the screen. And again, you see a lot of that in the trailers. Just know that all of those sets in the trailers are practical sets.
Did they do a lot of like set dressing of practical set dressing on like Budapest streets, or was it a lot of it done in a
That is not a question I know the answer to. I really don't know. I really don't know.
Because when they announced that they were going to do it in Budapest, which I think like actually happened, they had planned to do it somewhere else, and then they switched gears or whatever it was. A lot of people thought it would had to do with the fact that you have all these like old parts of town that have these old buildings that have a lot of weathering and whatnot to them, and it might make it easier for them to make a lived-in look.
It could be, but I really don't know. Budapest, by the way, absolutely beautiful city. One of the loveliest cities I have ever been to. Really.
Like art directors and CG supervisors' relationship with the technologies now, both in sounds like in this film and also, most recently films like Rogue One, have now found this really happy balance of recreating how you remember and the things you loved about a film made 20, 30 years ago, but using technologies today. Yes, a lot of it's tangible, a lot of it's physical, but sounds like even, the cityscape shots, right? The stuff that were miniatures in the original film, the actual miniatures themselves, it doesn't stand out as that's an effect, that's a CG effect.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I guess the last thing I would say, non-spoilery at all, is that in the same way that the film does wonderful tips of the hat to its predecessor, they don't tip the hat in any of the obvious ways that you would. Like, if you made a list of the 5 dumb ways you could reference Blade Runner if you were making its sequel, they don't do any of those.
Oh, okay.
They don't do a single one.
No owl shot.
No owl shot, man. And I really respect that. I really, I love the subtlety of, it's clear that the guiding hand of a master artist and a vision that is that transports you somewhere else, which is what was so amazing about Blade Runner. Its vision of the future was so immersive and so complete. This film feels of the same kind and the same piece. Yeah. I don't know whether this is a classic. I don't know how it's going to weather. But I cannot wait to see it again. I really I'm itching to sit down.
What is your relationship with a movie like this? We're in the pre-watching it. You're in the post now. So
you're in the future.
I'm sitting here thinking all I have to do is shut the fuck up. I'm not telling anybody. Yeah. I'm going to see it with my wife in a couple of weeks, and I'm not telling her a damn thing.
But how do you process your relationship with the film now, post-film? Are you going through all the interviews now? Going through all the trailers?
I have been.
Okay.
I've actually been watching the trailers every night to enjoy the little piece of that experience that I can. I can't wait to see it again and really start to unpack some of the metaphorical, allegorical imagery and plot stuff that goes on in the film, because it's quite sophisticated, and I'm excited about what they've left there, because it also feels like, I don't know. I have no idea what their plans are, but it feels like we could continue in this world.
Well, it's been like 40 years too. I mean, it's just it's kind of overwhelming a little bit to see, like that first teaser trailer that came out where he's walking along in the snow and slush, and those of us who've paid attention knew that they originally wanted to do snow and slush, and they couldn't do it with the big street cleaners. It's like I don't know why. It just felt like everything was like kind of coming rushing back.
Well, specifically, the reason that would resonate to you is because Villeneuve is from your hometown, and Villeneuve said, in my Blade Runner, it's going to snow.
Oh, well, that's good. And we know snow.
It was one of the other things that I've enjoyed seeing from what piece of the inside I've been allowed to see, is the deep clarity they've had about how to let this film out. Seeing the film makes the trailers even more brilliant to me. On set last fall, they knew that one of the key shots in the teaser trailer was going to be Harrison Ford's gun coming into focus.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that had been storyboarded by the storyboard artists months before they cut that trailer, and they knew that was going to be their key shot. Like, that level of intelligence is really gratifying.
Yeah, especially for people like us who have been chasing after that weapon for, and and you've seen a lot of the props up close at Comic-Con and whatnot. Like, I personally feel like there's a lot there to continue my love for Blade Runner props. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Voight-Kampff machine, big fan of Harrison Ford's gun, like even Mother's
Defender.
Mother's Defender and whatnot.
Well,
so do you feel like now it's like, oh, great, I get to continue my obsession with the hardware and whatnot?
I do. And I mean, I was sitting there with Doug Harlocker, who's the prop master for the film, looking over his amazing wares. And I mean, even then, he's very specifically not able to tell me even what this prop does, what that one's for. And yet you can see the world building, the deep world building that they have invested these pieces with. And actually, this month's Wired magazine has some fantastic pictures of Love's gun, of binoculars, of handcuffs, and some other pieces, including a very funny, beautiful Voight-Kampff machine that I believe was built by my friend Dan Winters, who shot that entire photo essay. Yeah, Dan was a model maker originally. And
has the bellows, has something for the eye.
It's wonderful.
I know a lot of us have our eyes on Love's weapon. It looks like that next plausible step from Harrison Ford gun to the future. And not to dork out a little bit too much, but
the spinners look great. I mean, the spinners you see in the trailer,
do they have Renault symbols on them, or is something like that?
A Renault symbol does show up in the film.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it. I was
like, Renault, really?
Oh, they better watch out. Their stock's going to drop if the curse continues. I don't know if they're still making cars, but
TDK.
TDK, Pan Am.
Didn't Renault... Was it sudden acceleration syndrome that undid Renault here? I believe it was. Sure. The first mass hysteria that somehow your car was going to take off without you, and it just turned out someone stepping on the gas instead of the brake.
Those little mini cars, the Renault Sank or whatever it is. Yeah, oof. You might as well have been in a shoebox with wheels.
I know that based on your embargo, you can only talk about your emotions. I'm not going to ask you to make the facial expressions as you watch the film, but just what did you end on? What was your facial expression when the film ended?
I'm not sure I could replicate it, but I did turn to the person next to me, and both of us had the same response: was that was really great, right? Like, you don't know. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes a movie can be so overwhelming you don't realize that the plot had giant holes in it. And I've spent a lot of this week sort of unpacking and like, no, that really works. Okay, that one's weird, but that's cool. And wow, it's so beautiful. Yeah, right, like that. Yeah. So that's what a lot of us were doing in that screening room.
There's nothing worse than walking out of a movie trying to convince yourself that you like it.
And I've been there too. Yeah, I've been there too.
Yeah.
All right.
I can't wait for not the next podcast, but when next we speak about Blade Runner 2049 on the podcast, it will be half of a response for Norm and then a full goddamn spoiler cast, man. We're gonna unpack this thing. We're gonna figure it out.
Can't wait.
All right. Thank you so
forward
much,
to it.
Mark, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And,
I appreciate it.
We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.
Have a better one.